Welcome to the video. Today we uncover the chilling true story from 1862 Mississippi about a slave boy whose survival defied every natural law and left witnesses terrified and confused. Before we begin, tell me where you're watching from and make sure to subscribe, because it takes days of digging through forgotten archives to bring these true historical mysteries to you. Now let's step in. The origins of the boy were whispered about long before his name ever reached the ears of those outside the plantation. He was born during a violent storm that shook the small wooden cabins and sent a heavy darkness over the fields, as if the sky itself rejected his arrival. Older enslaved women later said the air felt wrong that night, and the animals paced restlessly as though they sensed something powerful surrounding the newborn child. No one could explain why the infant did not cry or why his skin held an unusual stillness, as if he were waiting for something unseen. The overseer who delivered him claimed he felt a chill that sank deep into his bones, and he refused to speak of that night again. As the boy grew, he showed signs that unsettled everyone around him. He moved with a quiet presence and watched others with eyes that seemed far older than his small body. The other children kept their distance because they swore the boy always knew when trouble was coming and often reacted before anything happened. Some said he caused these events, while others believed he simply sensed danger in ways no ordinary child could. The adults whispered that he carried a mark or a purpose placed upon him at birth, and that this purpose was something beyond human understanding. Even the plantation owner kept notes on the boy, though he never allowed anyone to see what he had written. Fear spread through the workers as strange incidents followed the boy wherever he went. A barn that had been sturdy for years collapsed moments after he stepped out of its doorway without any visible cause. A field hand who struck the boy claimed he felt something cold take hold of his heart, and he fell sick the next day with an illness no healer could identify. The people around him feared both the child and the consequences of angering him, as though the world itself shifted in response to his presence. The plantation began to feel less like a place of labor and more like a place watched over by an unseen force tied directly to the boy. The house servants grew convinced that the boy had come from a lineage or a power that did not belong to the world they knew. They spoke of the silent way he moved and the strange light that sometimes reflected in his eyes under the moon. They avoided being alone with him and prayed quietly whenever he passed. A sense of dread settled over the entire property, as if the boy carried an unanswered question that no one wished to speak aloud. His origins remained a mystery, and the fear surrounding him only deepened with time as everyone sensed that his life would unfold in ways that defied all reason and all human explanation. A case that even doctors and researchers could never explain. The night he survived a fatal injury no human should endure became the moment that turned quiet suspicion into open terror on the plantation. It happened during a long stretch of heat when tempers rose and the air felt heavy with tension. The boy had been ordered to carry a load far too heavy for someone his age, and when he stumbled, the overseer struck him with a metal rod in a fit of rage. Witnesses said the blow landed with a sickening sound and the boy fell without moving, as though life had left his body at once. No one dared to approach at first because the injury looked final, and the silence that followed felt unnatural, as if the world were holding its breath. word spread quickly and the plantation owner arrived expecting to find a lifeless child on the ground. People stepped aside because they knew the boy did not survive ordinary injuries and they feared what they might see. The owner knelt beside him and saw a wound so deep that bone was visible and blood soaked the dirt beneath him. Any ordinary person would have died in moments, yet the boy suddenly opened his eyes with a calm expression that froze the crowd in place. He stood up slowly, without pain, without fear, and without any sign that his body understood what had happened. The overseer who had struck him stepped back in horror, unable to reconcile what he had seen with the laws of nature he believed in. The group watched as the wound closed with impossible speed, leaving only a faint mark that faded even as they stared. Some gasped, some prayed, and others fled the scene altogether, believing they had witnessed something unholy. The boy simply walked away with the same quiet steps he always took, as though he had risen from sleep rather than from near death. Those who remained said the air felt charged around him, like the space itself shifted to protect him. The plantation owner refused to speak of it again, yet his hands trembled for hours afterward, and he warned everyone never to touch the boy again under any circumstances. That night changed everything. Whispers filled the quarters long after darkness settled, and no one slept easily. People argued over what they had seen, but all agreed that the boy was no longer just a child living under hardship. He was something beyond human limits, something capable of surviving what should have killed him instantly. The injury that left no lasting mark became a legend before sunrise, and the fear surrounding him grew into something heavy and constant. From that moment on, the plantation was not just a place of labor and suffering. It became a place haunted by the presence of a boy who defied death itself. The doctor who examined him arrived at the plantation with confidence because he believed every injury had an explanation grounded in nature. He had treated countless wounds and illnesses through years of hardship, and he trusted his knowledge more than the frightened whispers of the workers. When he entered the small cabin where the boy sat, he expected to find a child in shock or in agony, yet the boy looked calm and alert, as if nothing unusual had occurred. The doctor approached with steady hands, expecting to prove that fear had exaggerated the story, but the moment he touched the boy, he felt a deep chill run up his arm that made him pause in confusion. That he leaned closer to study the wound that workers claimed had been deadly only hours earlier. What he saw made his breath stall. The skin had healed far beyond what any body could accomplish in such a short time, leaving only a faint line that seemed to fade even as he observed it. He pressed gently along the area and found no tenderness, no heat, and no sign of trauma. The boy watched him with silent eyes that unsettled him more than the injury itself, because the gaze felt ancient and aware, as if the child understood more than any patient he had ever treated. The doctor tried to speak but found that his voice trembled against his will. As the doctor continued his examination, objects in the room began to shift without his touching them. A wooden stool tilted slowly before settling again, and dust in the air moved in strange patterns as if guided by an unseen force. The boy remained still and expressionless while the doctor felt the weight of something pressing against his mind like a warning he could not interpret. He finished his examination quickly, his heartbeat rising with each passing second. When he stepped back from the boy, he noticed that his hands shook so violently he could barely gather his medical bag. Fear pressed into his thoughts deeper than any rational process could reach. He left the cabin without speaking to anyone and walked straight to the main house with a pale expression that frightened the servants who crossed his path. That night he locked himself in the guest room, refusing food or conversation and pacing endlessly as though trying to escape a presence that clung to him. Before dawn he saddled his horse and fled the plantation without waiting for payment or permission. Those who saw him leave said he rode as if something chased him, though nothing followed. He never returned and he never sent word. His disappearance became another piece of the growing mystery, and the workers whispered that whatever he saw in the boy had broken something inside him beyond repair. From the time he could walk, the boy showed a strange relationship with pain that unsettled everyone around him. Workers on the plantation noticed that injuries which would cripple any ordinary child seemed to pass through him as if his body refused to acknowledge harm. He would scrape his skin on rough wood or cut himself on sharp tools, yet he never cried or flinched. The wounds closed with unnatural speed, leaving only faint traces that vanished within hours. People began avoiding his presence because they felt that something in him operated outside the rules of the world they understood, and they feared what such a difference might mean for them. One of the earliest incidents happened when he fell from the top of a wooden cart, landing on hard ground with a force that should have left him unable to stand. Witnesses rushed toward him expecting to find him broken or unconscious, but he rose slowly with a calm expression and dusted himself off without any sign of distress. The older men, who had seen countless accidents in their lives, stared in stunned silence because they knew injuries from such falls were often fatal. The boy looked at them with quiet eyes that revealed nothing and walked away as though nothing unusual had happened. That moment spread fear through the quarters because people understood that this was not normal strength or resilience but something deeper and unexplainable. Another unsettling moment occurred during a fire that broke out near the storage shed. Flames and heavy smoke filled the area and workers scrambled to escape. Someone shouted that the boy was still inside, and panic spread because the heat was intense enough to burn skin instantly. Yet when the smoke cleared, he stepped out carrying a bucket of tools with a steady posture and skin untouched by burns. The men who witnessed this fell silent because they had seen grown adults collapse under lesser heat. The boys simply placed the tools on the ground and walked quietly past them, leaving no explanation for how he survived unscathed in a place where no living creature should have been able to stand. As more incidents occurred, the belief grew that the boy did not feel pain in any way that humans did. Some workers thought he was blessed while others believed he was cursed, and each new incident deepened their fear. The overseers avoided touching him, and the families in the cabins crossed themselves whenever he passed after dark. People whispered that his body was protected by a force that rejected injury, or that he lived half in another world where the rules of flesh and blood did not apply. His presence came to feel like a question that no one wanted to answer because everyone sensed that whatever allowed him to survive the impossible was not meant to exist within the boundaries of an ordinary human life. The overseer's attempts to destroy him began after fear replaced authority in their minds, and they could no longer tolerate the presence of a child who defied every rule of nature. The first attempt happened in secret when one overseer known for his cruelty decided to test whether the stories about the boy were exaggerated. He waited until night when the fields were silent and the cabins dim with fading lantern light. He cornered the boy near the edge of the property and struck him with a force meant to end his life instantly. The blow should have crushed bone and ended breath, yet the boy remained standing with steady eyes that showed no pain and no fear. The overseer felt a cold pressure around his chest as if the air thickened and refused to let him move freely. He fled without looking back and refused to speak of the event for the rest of his life. The second attempt involved two overseers who believed the child was a threat to the stability of the plantation. They lured him to a shed under the pretense of work and locked the door behind him. Their plan was to leave him without food or water for days, certain that even his strange resilience could not withstand starvation. But when they returned the next morning, they found the shed door wide open and the boy standing outside with the same calm expression as if he had walked through the wood itself. The overseers felt a sharp fear that settled deep in their stomachs. The door still hung on its hinges yet bore no marks, and the boy showed no signs of weakness. After that day the two men refused to be alone near him. The third attempt came from desperation rather than cruelty. A new overseer brought in from another region heard stories of the boy and believed he was dealing with superstition rather than truth. He tried to drown the child in a deep pond far from the main house, thinking that water would succeed where force and confinement had failed. Witnesses later said they saw the boy sink under the surface and remain there for an impossible amount of time. Just as the overseer began to panic, the boy rose from the water without gasping or coughing and walked to the shore with steady steps. The overseer stared in shock, unable to grasp what he had witnessed. Later that night he fell ill with a fever that took his life within days, and many on the plantation believed the boy had not been alone in that water. The final attempt never reached completion because the overseers had grown too afraid to act. They whispered among themselves, but no one dared approach him again. The boy moved through the plantation with an aura that kept others at a distance, and even the bravest men avoided his path. The overseers learned that harming him brought consequences they could not understand. It felt as though something invisible circled him at all times, watching, waiting, and responding with silent precision whenever he was threatened. Their fear grew into a truth that everyone on the plantation accepted. The boy could not be harmed, and anyone who attempted to destroy him would face a fate far worse than failure. From the beginning, people on the plantation believed the boy was protected by something not human because every event surrounding him carried a weight that felt unnatural. Workers said the air changed when he walked by, becoming colder as though an unseen presence moved with him. Animals reacted strangely to his nearness, turning away or watching him with wide, unblinking eyes. Even the wind felt different around him, refusing to touch his hair or clothing in the way it brushed over everyone else. These small signs caused quiet fear to grow because the people living there had seen enough hardship to know the difference between bad luck and something far beyond human understanding. They whispered that a force accompanied the boy and that this force chose him long before the plantation ever tried to break him. One of the earliest signs of this unseen protection occurred when the boy wandered into the forest during a heavy storm. Lightning struck a tree near him with a crack that shook the ground, yet the boy remained untouched while debris fell all around him. When workers found him, he was standing calmly beside the shattered trunk as though nothing unusual had occurred. They looked at the scene with dread because the tree had split in a way that should have harmed anyone nearby. The workers began praying under their breath and guiding their children away from him because they believed something invisible shielded him from dangers that were fatal to others. The storm quieted unnaturally fast after they reached him, intensifying the belief that forces beyond nature hovered near him. More signs appeared when those who meant him harm suffered consequences that had no reasonable explanation. A man who shouted threats at the boy lost his voice the next morning, unable to speak more than a faint whisper. A woman who mocked him began sleepwalking in patterns around the cabins, following paths she did not recognize and could not recall by morning. Tools broke only in the hands of those who mistreated him, and rooms grew icy cold when arguments erupted near his presence. These events spread unease across the plantation, and people began avoiding confrontation when the boy was near. They feared they were not just angering a child but awakening something unseen that circled him with silent watchfulness. The belief in his protection became stronger as the years passed. Workers spoke of seeing shapes in the corners of rooms when the boy entered, shadows that did not match any person or object. Others claimed they heard soft whispers behind the boy when he slept, as though he was never truly alone. Elders in the quarters warned that no one should cross him because he was guarded by forces that existed beyond the world of flesh and bone. Even the overseers stopped giving him orders out of fear that whatever protected him was watching them too. By the time he reached his early teens, the entire plantation accepted that the boy was not simply resilient or lucky. He was shielded by something powerful and silent, something that made itself known only through the strange events that surrounded him and the fear it carved into the hearts of all who witnessed its influence. The seventh turning point in the boy's story came when the plantation owners attempted to recreate the exact conditions of the tragedies he had survived because they believed some hidden trick or protection was shielding him from injury. Yet every test they carried out made the situation even more mysterious. People watched him walk through situations that should have left him injured or unconscious, but he emerged with the same calm expression as if nothing had happened. This terrified the enslaved community because they believed he was marked by something beyond human understanding, while the plantation owners whispered about supernatural forces and began to fear him in a way they had never feared any enslaved child before. Soon he was no longer allowed to work or play with the others because everyone believed that whatever surrounded him was not safe to be close to. Yet the boy himself never spoke about what he felt or saw. He only watched silently as everyone around him struggled to explain how he kept surviving these events that no child should have survived, and this silence made his presence even more unsettling to everyone who encountered him. The final and most unsettling chapter of the boy's life unfolded when plantation authorities sent him to a physician in the nearby town because they wanted answers that no one on the plantation could provide, and the doctor examined him again and again, searching for hidden injuries, broken bones, or signs of trauma that should have been present but were not, and every test only deepened the confusion because the boy's body showed no trace of the accidents he had lived through. The doctor questioned him, tried to make him speak, tried to understand whether he felt pain or fear, yet the boy stayed silent as if he carried a secret he would never reveal. When word spread that even the town doctor could not solve the mystery, people from nearby communities began traveling just to see the child with their own eyes, and each visitor left with the same uneasy feeling that something was deeply wrong and something far beyond ordinary life was shaping his existence. Eventually the boy was returned to the plantation where everyone kept their distance, and his presence became a quiet, haunting reminder of things that defied explanation. He grew more isolated with each passing day, and the stories about him slowly transformed into whispered legends that would continue long after the plantation itself disappeared, leaving behind only the memory of a child who lived through the impossible again and again without a single word to explain why. Over the years the legend of the boy grew far beyond the boundaries of Mississippi, and people repeated his story in hushed voices because no one could decide whether he had been blessed or cursed, and some believed he was a divine sign while others feared he was touched by forces no one should ever encounter, and each retelling added new layers of mystery because there were too many eyewitnesses, too many near-fatal events, and too many unanswered questions for the story to fade away. And soon travelers, merchants, and even wandering preachers carried his tale from one settlement to another until it reached places hundreds of miles away, and every listener felt the same quiet chill as they imagined a child walking away from disasters that should have ended his life without a single mark left on him. And with each passing year, the boy became less of a person and more of a symbol. Used to warn children, used to frighten adults, or used to remind people that the world still held secrets that science and scripture could not fully explain. And long after the plantation vanished, long after the people who knew him had passed away, the story of the silent boy who survived the impossible remained alive, turning him into a haunting reminder that some mysteries were never meant to be solved.